This video will be an explanation of the method used to save an A press by doing a particular set of actions during the star get a hand. I will elaborate on the details in a minute, but I will begin by explaining what this strategy is meant to accomplish. First, entering the stage Tick Tock Clock from the floor currently requires one A press. This is a bit of a problem because every time a normal star is collected, the player is ejected from the course. This means the stage entries would normally amount to 6 A presses, one for each stage entry. However, there is actually a way to save some of these A presses. If Mario stands on a moving platform, he will move at the same velocity as the platform. But in the original Japanese version of the video game, there is a bug in the code that causes Mario to be moved for one more frame after he is no longer on the platform. This includes instances where he exits the level while on a moving platform via collecting a star on a moving platform. In these cases, Mario will be displaced from his intended position in the hub world. This glitch is called spawning displacement. Spawning displacement also works on rotating platforms. So what happens if Mario collects a star while standing on the spinner? When Mario exits the level, he is moved all the way up here to align with where he is supposed to exit. However, since the rotating platform affects him for one more frame, he is pivoted around where the platform used to be, and the displacement is more noticeable because the effect of the rotation is magnified over a long distance. As a result, he gets caught on the top of the clock, saving the A press to jump back in. This can be done in some of the stars in Tick Tock Clock to save some of the A presses. One way to achieve this is to kick a wall in the same frame he collects the star. This causes Mario to receive backward speed upon collecting the star, allowing the player to fall down and land on the spinner. This can be done with Get a Hand, the star that this video is about. To kick, the player needs to press the B button while the A button is being held, so although the A button is still being used, it does not incur any more A presses to the total count because the player can simply use an A press used to enter the stage and continue holding A for the duration of the star. So the number of A presses located inside the stage is generally noted as 0.5 A presses, which sounds a bit silly, but refers to the halfway point of the two interpretations. 0 A presses if there's an A press before it, and 1 A press if there isn't. So in summary, the player will press the A button to enter Tick Tock Clock, hold the A button until Mario reaches the star, kick the wall while collecting the star to land on the spinner, and displace Mario's spawn position, saving an A press over the alternative method. If only it was that easy. The kick recoil doesn't bring him far enough to land on the spinner. So there needs to be a method to move him further in this direction so that he can land on the spinner. One way to do this is to cause him to be pushed by walls. Walls are actually areas that move Mario in a direction every time there's a collision check, and they extend out from both sides of the wall. If a wall manages to move into Mario while he's falling, he will be pushed in its direction horizontally, allowing him to gain more distance. But which wall could he possibly use? Well, there is a swinging pendulum right underneath the area containing the star, and there exists a technique that allows Mario to cause pendulums to swing past their normal range. If the stage is entered in the random setting, pendulums swing slowly 2/3 of the time and quickly 1/3 of the time. When a pendulum swings, it will first randomly decide a speed, and then it will start with no velocity, accelerate by the index attached to its swinging speed, which is either 13 or 42, meaning it accelerates by the same amount every frame, and then start decelerating once it passes the angle where it is vertical, until it reaches no velocity again. Then it will randomly select one of the two speeds again and continue. If a pendulum selects the same speed multiple times, this causes it to follow the same path every time. However, if it oscillates between the two speeds, it ends up slightly changing due to a different constant increase in velocity. If it oscillates enough times, one of its frames ends up exactly on the vertical angle. Since it hasn't passed the vertical angle yet, it accelerates for one more frame before it starts decelerating. If it then selects the same speed again, it will follow the same path and end up at the vertical angle, but this only causes it to accelerate yet again. If it continues to select the same speed after that, it can swing well beyond its normal range. But how does Mario make the pendulum swing exactly the way he wants it to, when it's random? In this video game, RNG is determined using a cycle of approximately 65,000 numbers, each of which can be seen as the previous value with a convoluted set of operations applied to it. On any frame, several objects may call the RNG function. In the case of pendulums, that's fast if the number is a multiple of 3 and slow otherwise. Based on their order in the game's list of object slots, each object, including pendulums, will receive and use a number in that cycle. Mario can influence this cycle by kicking up dust. Dust calls the RNG function for small variations in its movement, so if Mario kicks a number of dust particles such that the pendulum receives the number he wants, he can choose which speed the pendulum moves at. This is called pendulum manipulation. So that's what happens here. Mario kicks up dust to make the pendulum speed oscillate enough times so it ends up at the vertical angle. This takes about 291 swings. Then he makes sure the pendulum keeps going fast, so it increases its range and it eventually swings up through the ceiling. Finally, he does the kick recoil and enters the front wall of the pendulum's hitbox to get pushed forward, and it's not far enough. Mario will need to be pushed by multiple wall hitboxes instead of just one. This may sound infeasible, but there are actually 10 wall hitboxes right there. Every surface in this video game is made out of triangles. The rectangles are triangles, the octagons are triangles, and the pendulums are triangles. The pendulum's triangles actually all meet at a single vertex. Also relevant is that Mario's position is a single point, with floating point numbers as x, y, and z coordinates. The model is seen in the game as really visual, and usually contains its actual position between the model's feet. So if Mario's position ends up exactly on the point where the 10 wall triangles meet each other, he will actually get pushed by all of them at once, similarly to how Mario behaves if he is in multiple walls in a normal situation, such as in the corner of a room. This would result in a net movement of 10 times that of one wall's length, potentially allowing Mario to reach the spinner. However, there are two problems. The first one is that the point where all triangles intersect is precise down to the floating point number, which doesn't make it impossible, only very difficult. But the second problem is that a kick recoil does not bring Mario high enough to reach the intersection. So there needs to be a way to allow Mario to kick from higher up to reach the overlap of 10 triangles. This will be done using the same pendulum to gain a bit of height while inside the ceiling. It is now finally time to start the full superplay and explain what's going on. In this route, Mario actually starts in a different stage. I will explain why in a minute, but first I need to explain how holding objects works. So when Mario is holding an object, he isn't actually holding the object, but instead a visual copy of the object. In the case of Bob-ombs, the actual object is made invisible and placed in front of Mario, slightly further away, so the Bob-omb's hitbox does not affect him. But if Mario grabs the Bob-omb while it's expanding before it explodes, it has a larger hitbox when he grabs it, and it does affect him. The result is Mario constantly being pushed backwards. Since the bomb still has a fuse timer, it needs to be dropped and grabbed periodically to make sure it doesn't explode, but this allows him to carry it all the way over to here. So why exactly does Mario need to start in this level? Well, if the game needs to render a visual held object, it also keeps track of a point in 3D space that always updates to where the held object is. When Mario releases the object, the original object is programmed to be teleported to this point. After that, this point simply stays where it was when the new object was released until Mario grabs another object again, even if Mario exits the stage and enters a new one. This point is typically called the held object last position. Before the long A press used to enter this stage and do the kicks, the Bob-omb is released at a very specific spot such that it corresponds to this location when Mario switches stages. In this case, it ends up way out of bounds. This will be useful for the following strategy. When Mario first enters the stage, he does a trick called instant release, where he dives into a Bob-omb while the Bob-omb is against the wall, such that he grabs the Bob-omb and bonks into the wall on the same frame. Since bonking into a wall causes Mario to drop objects, he drops the Bob-omb on exactly the same frame he grabs it. Crucially, this means he releases the object before the visual copy of the Bob-omb even renders, meaning the held object's last position doesn't update, causing the Bob-omb to release at the held object's last position. Well, not quite. If Mario throws an object, it appears at the held object's last position, but in this case, he drops the Bob-omb when blocking the wall. Dropping an object instead causes the object to move to the held object last position x and z coordinates, but to Mario's y coordinate. Under normal circumstances, this places the object on the floor in front of Mario. In this scenario, Mario performs instant release on two different Bob-ombs at two different heights. Since Mario is at different heights, the Bob-ombs end up at different vertical positions after this is done. So what is the purpose of putting two Bob-ombs way out of bounds? The Bob-ombs have an activation radius, which is simply a large sphere around the Bob-omb. If Mario is outside of that sphere, the Bob-omb is deactivated. The game also has a failsafe script that teleports a Bob-omb to Mario if it is out of bounds, which runs if the Bob-omb is currently activated, so the effect of this is that the Bob-omb teleports directly to Mario as soon as he enters its radius. The held object's last position was placed in a way such that when the Bob-ombs are released there, their activation radii would intersect with the corner of the box containing the Get a Hand star. Therefore, Mario can climb these spinners and reach this location before he enters their radii and reactivates them. Finally, since the two Bob-ombs are at slightly different heights, their activation radii intersect the area at slightly different positions, so Mario can activate both of them sequentially. So with all this in mind, here's what Mario does. First, Mario kicks up dust to manipulate the RNG function cycle so that the pendulum starts swinging through the ceiling. Then, he enters one of the activation radii, causing the Bob-omb to teleport directly to Mario. To grab the Bob-omb, he can't simply use the B button to grab it because A is being held and this causes him to kick the Bob-omb instead. So Mario briefly walks off the ledge to do a dive towards the Bob-omb to grab it that way. When doing this, he grabs the Bob-omb at an early frame of the explosion. This will give him a slight push backwards because the frame that the Bob-omb is grabbed affects the speed at which Mario is pushed backward due to the Bob-omb being a different size. He navigates to the corner of the box to activate a second Bob-omb, causing it to teleport to him. It explodes, and Mario ends up inside this block. There is a wall hitbox here that tries to push Mario in this direction, but the pushes from the Bob-ombs are enough to bring him past the hitbox. This brings him into a ceiling hitbox, because ceiling hitboxes always extend infinitely upwards or up until the next floor hitbox. Usually, if Mario's next intended position ends up in a ceiling hitbox, the movement is cancelled, but that doesn't happen here because the movement is caused by the bomb pushing him into it instead of Mario moving into it himself. Mario cannot usually move around while inside the ceiling hitbox, but he's still holding a Bob-omb that pushes him backwards, so by turning himself he is able to navigate. So why is Mario doing all of this work to push himself into the ceiling? Well, the pendulum that was manipulated from before was also manipulated to stop in this particular spot, in order to lift Mario a little higher. The top of the pendulum here also counts as a floor, so there isn't any ceiling above it. After adjusting his height on the pendulum, Mario navigates himself using the Bob-omb to the area right behind the star, at a height sufficient to kick recoil into the overlap of 10 wall triangles. Now, all I need to do is wait until the pendulum yields sufficient position and speed to make the floating point precise overlap possible. However, I've been glossing over what's actually done during the RNG manipulation. There are, in fact, 4 critical things that are required to be manipulated in the right way for this to be possible. The first one is the 10 wall overlap used to displace Mario by a significant amount, which needs to intersect Mario's trajectory at a sufficient speed to allow the displacement to work. The second one is the same pendulum used to lift Mario to put him in reach of the 10 wall intersection. Pendulums actually call the RNG function a second time to determine how long it should wait before swinging again, so that needs to be long enough wait time as well. These first 2 instances are the most precise because the overlap is only present as a single floating point number, and brute forcing was required to find a way to give these the exact required values. The third segment is the hand, which is placed in this rotation so that Mario can brush himself along it, adjusting his position during the fall to be able to land on the spinner. The final crucial point is the spinner that Mario is meant to land on, which is required to spin clockwise while Mario is on it in order to provide sufficient spawning displacement. Note that Mario still doesn't go far enough to land on the spinner normally, so he instead needs to make use of a star dance clip. When Mario touches a ledge to perform a ledge grab, Mario's position is actually moved to the top of the ledge, even though the visual model hangs off of it. This operation also works during the fall after collecting the star, even though the model switches to the dance instead of hanging off the ledge. This is why he will appear to snap up directly onto the spinner. Okay, all of this setup builds up to the kick recoil. Here it is. By kicking off the wall, touching the 10 wall triangle intersection, brushing on the hand, and star dance clipping onto the spinner, Mario can receive sufficient spawning displacement to land on top of the clock and avoid another A press to enter the stage again. By the way, picking which order to collect the stars in this stage is somewhat tricky, since 3 of them require preset held objects last positions, and 3 of them contain spawning displacement strategies similar to this one. And since setting the held object's last position requires entering the stage normally afterwards, spawning displacement should not be done right before it. This creates a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, but it is possible to find an order that allows 3 entrances to work. Also, spawning displacement only happens in the original Japanese version of the game, so in other versions, the spawning displacement strategies, including the one described in this video, do not work, and the stars are simply collected normally. Although this does add 3 extra A presses. So, that's it.